is great to see you this morning. A number of headlines. Politico says it's Hensarling's last stand blocking the banking bill. Similar headline in the American Banker. Is this Jeb Hensarling's last stand? So I will ask you, is this your last stand?
Well, at 5'6", I didn't know I could stand against anything. But the most important point I want to make is we are simply, as the House, trying to negotiate bipartisan bills with the Senate. And so this bill that the Senate came forward with, which I'm very happy they came forward with anything, it's a bucket of bipartisan bills. Well, guess what? We have a bucket of bipartisan bills in the House as well, many of which don't even touch Dodd-Frank, and a third of which passed either unanimously or by voice vote. Things like, certain registration requirements for small M&A brokers. Bills that have to do with the on-ramp for Starbucks 404B. And so we have a lot of bills that we think, it's a home run, but it can, to mix metaphors, move the needle on economic growth. And so I'm kind of surprised because last I've read in the Constitution, there were 2 houses of Congress. And if people haven't read the Constitution recently, maybe they'll remember Schoolhouse Rocks, and as the Wall Street, as the Wall Street Journal opined, we're not a potted plant. And so those who are trying to say that, well, this is conservative ideology, no, these are bipartisan bills. And so this is what we've done in the House. But the most important thing we have to do is I think we have a 3% tax code now, a 3% growth tax code. But we don't have a 3% financial regulatory structure. So in the House, we've been working for months. And we've passed almost 100 bills. Well, I look for those that had the strongest bipartisan support, and that's about a third of them.
But, Jeb, what you're saying sounds like 2 different things. On the one hand, you're saying, look, these are unanimously supported. On the other hand, it's not a 3% regulation bill. Which one is it? Are you looking for just broad basis to say, hey, the House has its issues that we've been able to be pretty bipartisan
Well, again, it's both.
on?
I wouldn't be putting forward the legislation if I didn't think that it could make some movement of the growth needle. On the other hand, we are not trying to poison the well with partisan bills. These are bipartisan bills. And by the way, this is the way Congress operates. You get a bill out of the Senate, you get a bill out of the House, you negotiate your differences. It would be one thing. I would understand the argument if the Democrats were saying, well, Hensarling's bringing forth Republican bills. Many of these bills have Democrat sponsors, co-sponsors.
So what's the path? Just
Negotiations. We have called on the Senate to negotiate. Otherwise, the bill that the Senate passed, which is sitting on the Speaker's desk, is going to remain on the Speaker's desk until and unless the Senate negotiates. And we are trying to negotiate in good faith, and they have to give us some reason. Maxine Waters voted for roughly half the bills that we're trying to negotiate with the Senate. So, again, this is somebody needs to explain to me why they can't accept this legislation. And so I know it's hard work.
That sounds totally reasonable. My guess would be the Senate would come back and say, hey, we barely cobbled this group together based on what we have. If we go back, we risk losing it. What do you say to that?
Well, I believe that this sets a floor, but it shouldn't set the ceiling. And again, otherwise, I don't know what I tell my House members. Why do you bother to show up at work? We'll just show up once a month and rubber stamp what the Senate does. We've got an opportunity to put some pro-growth measures in that are bipartisan, and the Senate ought to work with us.
Let me ask you just separately. What's your take on the budget?
I think we still have huge problems. I'm glad we have a 3% growth economy instead of a 1.6, but we are on a spending trajectory that is unsustainable. It continues to be unsustainable, and there's a lot of things that can help, but there's only one answer, and that is reform current entitlement programs for future generations.
Final banking question for me, and I've been writing a lot about it, which is the role of the finance industry as it relates to guns and gun control. And one of the things you saw last week was Citigroup come out publicly and say that they were actually going to stop doing business with retailers based on certain criteria around the sale of guns. I'm curious, have you thought about that? What you think about that? I know I've even heard the potential retribution against financial firms that take those steps in the same way that Delta was treated in Georgia. What do you think?
Well, I still fight for a free society. In a free society, a corporate entity is allowed to have their own corporate culture, and then they're going to have to deal with their customers.
Right.
And those are decisions that they have to make. And so that is separate and apart from a very, very serious issue of what do we do about school safety. I mean, I'd say that, you know, I got 2 kids in school in Dallas today, profound debate about the Second Amendment, but, you know, they're going to have to deal with their customers.
But do you think it's fair for corporations or banking institutions to try to think through some of these issues and come up with steps in the same way that Dick's or Walmart or other retailers do? Is that something that you're supportive of?
Again, I am supportive in a free society of a corporation having their own culture and making those decisions, but they are going to have to live with the results.
Right.
And if customers choose to boycott the company because they don't appreciate the corporate culture, again, that's part of living in a free society.
Okay.
Can we talk about climate change? If Andrew's going to, you just pick things that are important to you.
This is a banking guy. The banks are thinking about.
Where was your column today? I was looking forward to it. On what happened? I thought Tuesday was your column.
Tuesday was yesterday.
Oh, today Wednesday.
There was an entire column about it yesterday.
You wrote. You're back on. Yeah. Okay. All right. He said. You got your advocacy. It's
not advocacy. There's a lot of people.
You're a social warrior.
There's a lot of people who are thinking. There's a lot of people who are thinking right now
about. We need social warriors.
No, about what.
He wasn't thinking about it when he sat down. I guarantee you. He's like, what?
I would tell you that.
What about climate change?
Virtually.
I mean, where are you on that?
Come on. Virtually every major CEO in America right now, in the banking sector and others, are talking and thinking. They all have task forces and internal working groups who are thinking about the issue of guns
the latest thing
and what the relationship should be with them.
The latest thing was John Paul Stevens.
So
yesterday, if that is what you should have. I mean, he's 97 years old. He wrote, "Let's repeal the Second Amendment," and some people think that doesn't help the case of gun control people because it sort of. The cat comes out of the bag about what's really.
Well, at least he was honest.
Yeah, at least he's honest.
He was
but
honest
the left immediately, the left says, "Oh, holy crap!" Now this person's actually saying what the event. You know, if you say that, then it's going to energize the right immensely. So that's
let me just say, I think that all of the efforts that have been made thus far revolve around taking it from 18 to 21 years old. 4 times there's more. 4 times more. Hold on. There's 4 times more. The rate is 4 times higher for people who are 18 to 20 than it is.
Okay.
There's a reason for it. Bump stocks is an issue. Large cartridges is an issue, and background checks is an issue. I don't think that those are completely unreasonable issues to consider.
Yesterday, it was a lead editorial piece from a former Supreme Court justice that said, "Let's repeal the Second Amendment." That's what the Parkland students should focus on, is repealing the Second Amendment. So I'm just saying.
Is he saying that from a constitutionally clean way of doing it, or?
I mean, there's a way of repealing. If you get what do you need? It's a high bar to repeal an amendment.
It's a very high bar to repeal an amendment.
Well, but at least he's honest, just like you said. Yeah, I know. And climate change.
But I just want to be clear that I have not made that suggestion.
I'm not saying
every suggestion or idea that I've been raising around what the banking world or the corporate world would do is literally around age.
I know. I know. You wrote your first piece.
Well,
and
let's not forget mental health
mental health is a big issue.
Very big issue here.
That's a harder one for the financial sector to figure out.